as is. Before we get started, let me make sure, did everybody get one of these little tags here? All right, I want to make sure you have an as is tag plastered on you. Find some way of sticking it on you where I can see it. Stick in your shirt pocket or in your hair. I don't know. Find some place where we can see your as is tag.
She didn't even get one.
Book of Matthew, chapter 9, verses 10 through 13. I believe Karen has it up there. I want to say also, Karen, I appreciate those slides. They work really good with the sermon this morning. I appreciate it. If you read those slides, there ain't really need for me to preach this morning because that's the whole point. But to get started, there's a great many stores that we frequent that have this section of merchandise. It's usually marked pretty clearly. All the items in this section of the store are considerably cheaper than the exact same item on the other side of the store. There's usually a sign somewhere in this area, or maybe the tag that's on the item. Anybody guess what the two-word phrase is that's on these items? As is. This as is section of the store. Sometimes it's because the item's slightly irregular. Maybe it's a second on the assembly line. But whatever it is that makes it different, it is different. The fact remains that for some reason, for this item to be in this particular area of the store, it has to have as is label on it because it's damaged goods. This is the department of, you could call it the something's gone wrong section of the store. Something's wrong with it. You're going to find a flaw with it. It could be a stain that won't come out. It could be a tear or a hole in it. It could be a zipper that won't zip. It could be a seam that's not straight. There's some sort of problem with this product. The store usually won't tell you where it is. They want you to find that for yourself. But you can be sure it's there. And there's this fundamental rule in this department of the store. Anybody guess what that rule is? No return. Boy, you smart ladies. I knew the ladies would answer that one. My wife was here. She'd really answer that one. She hates when there's no returns, no refunds, no exchanges, no brings backs. But that's the fact. You can't take it back. You take it as is. Now, if you go to this part of the store and you're looking for something with perfection in it, well, you'd be walking down the wrong aisle. You see, with this item in this store, you have to take it as is. If you've ever dealt with humans in life, another human being, you might notice you're in the as-is section of the universe. So we're not perfect. Think for a moment about someone in your life, someone close to you, someone you love dearly. If you're honest with yourself about them, there's just something not right about that person. Something's off about them. They're just not quite all right. I won't mention any names, short, bald-headed men up front. But if you're honest, there's something not right about them, And we all want to be normal. But the writers of the Scriptures, though, insist that none of us are normal. No one's normal, at least not in the way God describes normally. The Scripture says, all we like sheep have gone astray. John Haddington said this. He said, I've been comforted for more than 20 years with the thought that Jesus welcomes not only the sensible sinners, but the stupid ones as well. I think I fall into that category from time to time. I think we all do. But that's what I want you to see today. See, Jesus came into this world, and he saw sin as it really was, with all its heartache and all its filth. And he died because of that sin. But he always had a great love and compassion for the person who was the sinner. Amen? Now, I don't believe that Christ was so soft and weak and that he was a sentimentalist who never condemned sin. Time and time again in the Scriptures, we see him standing before the sinner, and what does he say? He says, go and sin no more, doesn't he? But he was never so blinded by their sin that he did not see the good in someone, that he did not see qualities that were worth saving and redeeming. Now, our text today, his disciples are asked the question, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? When Jesus heard that, he said, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. Jesus understood what it was to see people with their big as is tag labeled right on, and to accept them anyway. So today I want you to see Jesus, his attitude towards sinner, but more importantly, his attitude toward the sinners. And in order to do that, let's look at a few different people. Back up a few verses in this chapter here in Matthew. We're going to see the story of where Jesus called Matthew to follow him. Now, in these scriptures, I just want to give you references so you can go later on and look them up. I'm not going to read the text here this morning, but I want to get to the food later on pretty quick. But I want you to go back and I want you to reread these stories so you can pick up on what I'm telling you. But I want to paraphrase them just to give you an idea of the content of these encounters with Jesus, these people that had big as is tags labels, these encounters they had with Jesus. And just a few verses prior, in the same conversation where these men are asked, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Just to tell you where they're at, Jesus and these men, he's got the fishermen, right? He's already called them, and they're following him. And they're walking through this town or this corridor or this hallway or wherever they're at, and they turn this corner. And as they turn this corner, they're going along and talking to these fishermen that have decided to follow him. They're kind of watching his every move. They're wanting to learn exactly what he is about and how to be like him. Because, of course, after all, he made them, catch a lot of fish. So they're like, I want to follow. I want to find out what this man's about. And Jesus stops at this table. Jesus stops at this table. And he sees this man. And this man's a Jew by the name of Matthew sitting at this table. That's not strange in any normal sense, but if you look at what he really was a Jew who had turned his back on his faith, a Jew who had turned his back on his people, had rejected the law, had rejected God. You see, Matthew was a tax collector. To break that down and tell you why he was a tax collector, Rome owned the land. Get that? Rome owned the land. Rome charged the taxes. Okay? But what Rome did is they gave rights to Roman citizens to be able to collect those taxes. And so you had Roman citizens buying the rights to collect the taxes. Roman citizens then jack up the taxes so they make a little profit. But then they don't want to get their hands dirty, so they go into the land that they have the rights to, and they find these Jews that have turned their back on God and they're back on the law and they're back on their faith and their families, and they hire them to do the dirty work. And then those people jack the taxes up again so they can collect the profit. And so that's who Matthew is. You got to understand that, because you got to know what his as-is tag is really for. He had rejected God, he had rejected the law, and he had this big tag plastered on him. And about this time, Jesus goes up to him, and he doesn't really do anything much, but he goes and he says, Matthew, I don't really want you to do anything different. I just want you to do the one thing I know you can do, and that is stand up and would you follow me? And about this time, I can imagine Peter saying, what? We're good Jews. We follow the law. We left this respectable fishing business to follow you, and now you want to invite a man like that to follow us? I don't think so. I could just imagine him tapping Jesus on the shoulder and say, hey, we need to talk over here. And Jesus says, yeah, he's going to follow us. Not only is he going to follow us, but we're going to his house. I could just imagine Peter saying, I can't go to his house. If I go to his house, I'm going to stink like a sinner. He says, Jesus, I don't believe you understand. This man's worse than a sinner. He's a tax collector. Even the Pharisees gave him his own title, a tax collector, not a sinner. They're not bunched together. He's worse than a sinner, according to them, because he had turned his back on God. And Jesus said, we're not only going to his house, but we're going to have dinner with him. We're going to have a party. Jesus saw Matthew with his big as-is label, and he accepted him, and he went to his house, and he loved him. And Matthew followed him. And now we have a book in the Bible after Matthew so that we can learn to follow him. Another encounter that we have in the Scriptures is the woman at the well. This is the book of John, the Gospel of John, chapter 4, verses 1 through 42. You don't have to turn there, but if you want to reference it so you can read it later, just take a minute of your time to read it. But I want you to check these accounts. See, Jesus is going against tradition here. Jesus kind of did that. He was a radical in his day. See, it was the tradition that a Jew would go around the town so he wouldn't have to encounter Samaritans. Samaritans would go around the town so they wouldn't have to encounter Jews. They hated each other. But Jesus went against that tradition. Jesus went into the town. And what he did is he went up to this at noon. He went up to this well and he began to sit down. And he waited there by the well in this Samaritan town of Sychar, while the apostles went on into the town to purchase food. As Jesus sat there, this woman came up from the city. This woman wasn't an ordinary woman. She was a woman who was tired of being the butt of jokes, the butt of gossip. She was a woman that was tired of being abused and the objects of ridicule by the respectable ladies in town. See, she was another woman like Matthew who had this big as-is tag label on her, plain for everybody to see. She was the topic of discussion. So to get away from that, she went up at noon in the heat of the day to collect her water. Expecting no one else to be there at the well, she arrives, and to her surprise, she not only finds somebody, she finds a Jew of all people sitting at a Samaritan well. She looked at Jesus, but she didn't say a word. She quickly went about her business, lowering her bucket into the water, pulling it up with the cool, clear water in. She takes a drink of herself. She begins to walk away. At about that time, Jesus says, "Will you give me a drink?" Now, at first, the woman's irate with him. She gets a little sarcasm in her voice. She says, "What are you thinking? You're a Jew, a Samaritan. You're not supposed to even talk to me. What makes you think I want to give you a drink?" Now, when you reread this account later, I want you to realize something. I want you to realize just how skillfully Jesus tore down the barriers and got to the real problem in her life. See, soon he was saying, "Go and get your husband and come back." See, Jesus wasn't afraid to approach the problem in her life, her as-is label. When she heard that, she said to him, "I have no husband." Jesus responded, "You're absolutely right. You don't have a husband. In fact, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with is not even your husband." I don't know about you folks, but if I said that to a woman, I'd probably find myself picking myself up off the floor. See, if you or I had said to that woman that, she wouldn't have understood it. It would have scared her. But Jesus had something in the tone of his voice, something in his eyes, something about his manner that made her realize that he wasn't trying to tear her down. He wasn't trying to berate her. He wasn't trying to demean her and make her feel guilty for her sins. Rather, he saw something in her that was still good and worth saving. He saw something that was worthwhile. And gradually he led her to believe it herself, to see that for herself. Now I understand Jesus probably endangered his reputation with this. Here was